1937, when Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe left Storer College to complete his college education at Howard University, he had to earn money for his expenses. Throughout the summer, he worked at odd jobs. At one time in Pittsburgh, he was penniless and depressed and lay down on train tracks to be smashed to death. Only the timely intervention of a good Samaritan saved him from committing suicide. Moreover, the driver of the train had also spotted him sprawling across the tracks and braked the locomotive.
Hawaii made an impact on the young Genesis' political and social consciousness as he witnessed the dehumanization of the Negro race in America and the beginning of the Negro resistance, black nationalism led by Marcus Garvey, race riots, etc. It was at Hawaii that he took to contributing articles and poems to the Hilltop, which is an undergraduate organ of opinion, the Journal of Negro History and Crisis. Many years later, Dr. Martin Luther King speaks on the preferred method of black resistance.
And through your suffering and your willingness to accept blows without retaliating, you at that moment find yourself working on the conscience of the opponent. You are exposing his moral defenses. You are weakening his morale.
Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe left Hawaii in the fall of 1929 due to financial problems which compelled him to odd jobs as dishwasher, steward, coal miner, and even a boxer. In September of 1929, he entered Lincoln University, Pennsylvania. At Lincoln, he operated a news bureau and was a correspondent of the Afro-American Tribune and Philadelphia Tribune. These two weekend newspapers received constantly news and occurrences at the university community. After obtaining a BA degree from Lincoln in June of 1930, he was employed as graduate assistant in the university. In the summer of 1930, he was admitted to Columbia University to study journalism with a scholarship from Phipps Trust Fund. At Columbia, Zik was selected on merit to be the associate editor of the University Summer Session Times. In 1932, Zik wanted to represent the United States in the Olympic Games, but the British Empire Games Council denied him entry due to the technical reason that he was a black man.
Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, by the time he came to the United States of America for his studies, was already acutely aware of racism. At one time, in a North Carolina mine, where he and other African students were among the students employed to do the casual work of miners on strike, he experienced hostility and violence from these regular miners, and a white timekeeper called him a nigger. Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe was so annoyed that he called the white timekeeper a red nose. Some years later, in his great book, Renascent Africa, Dr. Azikiwe advocated for a mental emancipation which teaches the African to be equal with other races of mankind, both physically and mentally.
Between 1930 and 1933, Zik pursued and concluded 2 master's degree programs, which were awarded by Lincoln University. One was in anthropology, with political science as a minor field, which earned him Master's of Science degree in February 1933, on the basis of a thesis on methodology on Onitsha society. The other was on religion and philosophy, which earned him Masters of Art degree in June 1932. Thereafter, he was employed in the fall of 1933 as a full-time lecturer in political science, and he taught ancient, medieval, modern and English history as well as African history. While still pursuing his master's programs, Zik registered for the Doctor of Philosophy degree in Political Science at Columbia University. His research on Liberian diplomacy from 1847 to 1932 was published in 1934 as a book, Liberia in World Politics, but he abandoned the doctorate degree itself. Zik returned to Africa in 1934, drawn from the intellectual spring of great black leaders such as Wallace Jackson, Horatio Jackson, Obinna Seki, Huxley Harford, Herbert Macaulay, Marcus Garvey, Dr. Dankwa, Williams Du Bois, and Bankole Awolowo. For a while, Zik has toyed with the idea of black African American leaders under Marcus Garvey to send black technical team to Liberia to assist in founding a university for training Africans in various professions. But this could not materialize, as Zik has raised only £40 of the £50,000 he projected that he will need. Zik returned to Nigeria at the end of 1934. However, his effort to get a job in Nigeria also failed. For this reason, he promptly moved to Accra, Ghana, where in 1935 he went to work for Mr. A.J. Okanse, proprietor of the Gold Coast Spectator, as editor of the Accra African Morning Post. Zik was not just a desk editor, but a journalist agitator. He had a column in the Post called Inside Stuff, through which he preached his gospel of New African Daily. The Inside Stuff was based on 5 postulates or principles that guided the writing of the articles. These articles were subsequently assembled together and published in 1937 as the magnum opus, that is, the great work of his youth, under the title Renascent Africa.
Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe's political philosophy is contained in his book Renascent Africa. In this book, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe sees old Africa as Africa of yesterday, Renascent Africa as Africa of today, that is Africa of the colonial times, and New Africa as Africa of tomorrow, which we are still about to come into. According to Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, the old Africa was handicapped by isolation, ignorance, social fragmentation, and political stagnation. Renascent Africa was handicapped by imperialism, colonialism, and racism. For Africa to move from Renascent Africa to New Africa, Renascent Africa must be imbued with 5 attributes, namely spiritual balance, economic determinism, social regeneration, mental emancipation, and political resurgence or risorgimento, which means unification.
Spiritual balance simply means the right of free expression, whether in speech or writing, and the obligation of society to tolerate free speech and divergent opinion or the views of others. By social regeneration, Azikiwe meant the abandonment by Africans and all the world of divisions, prejudices, and discriminations based on race, ethnicity, religion, nationality, and sex. By economic determinism, Azikiwe meant that wealth must not be concentrated in the hands of the few. No longer must the profit motive guide and control the aims in life of the Africans. No longer must the wage earners be told a dignity that does not seem to exist in labor. By mental emancipation, Azikiwe meant to let the Africans know that he had a glorious past and a glorious future. Africans have been miseducated. They need mental emancipation so as to be re-educated to the real needs of Renascent African. An African graduate of these foreign universities, unless he has developed his individuality, is nothing short of a megaphone. By political resurgence, Azikiwe meant the automatic development of nationalism and even